Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation and really engaging it. That's our hope is that you are taking all this and you're using it in your life in every way to help you to be a better leader in every area of your life. I'm Phil Dark, your host, and with me is my brother, my co-host, Paul Jobson. Paul, how you doing, man?
Phil, I'm doing great, man. Just hanging out here in Waco, Texas. Weather update, 70, sunny, as always in Waco, Texas. But things are good, man. How about you? What's been going on out there in Cali?
Well, it's actually been hot, and the reason why that's relevant, unlike you, I only talk about the weather out here when it's relevant, mostly because it's very similar. But I refed all weekend with my daughter, and it was, I'm getting older, and I felt it in the 84 degree, which wasn't that hot, but since it hasn't been that hot, get out there and on the turf especially. It was a long weekend. I did 10 games and,
Man,
that's too much for this nearly 50-year-old dude. I don't know, man. I decided I don't think I'm gonna do that many games again, but there's such a ref shortage as we've talked about in the past that it's hard, I wanna help out, but then I do it and I go, "Man, I can hardly walk." All the old guys, it was hysterical, all the old refs, because all of us had that many games, we're buckling, like, we're, like, squatting during games because 'cause we're just stretching on the sideline. It was actually really
that's not
funny.
good. That's not good for people not yelling at you. You know that, right? Like if you're buckling
Totally.
over in the middle of a match, and you got to call a penalty and they're like, hey, like, come on, refs.
Well,
You know?
Paul, when you call everything right, it's not a problem. You never have anybody yelling at you. So,
Good.
it's just, I don't know. That's the way I look at it anyway.
That
If
wasn't
they're
my luck with
yelling,
the
I just think
referee.
they're cheering. I think they're cheering when they're yelling at me. So I just say thank you, and it goes really well. But yeah, it's been good. Life is good right now. We got a lot of cool stuff going on. A lot of really good ministry opportunities. Lots of good things coming down the pike. Actually looking to do a cohort. Finally, we've been talking about it for a long time. We
Yeah.
got a cohort starting up of coaching the bigger game. We've got 5 coaches that are going to be involved with that. So if you're interested in that, folks, reach out and we can talk about it. So that and there's some other great things going out to Orlando to create some materials for the global sports movement and some more great training materials and cohort stuff there for disciple making and coaching and other areas of ministry. So yeah, really excited. Just lots of really cool things that are happening. So and you were
Awesome.
talking about Warrior Way, kind of finishing up for the spring.
Yep. Yeah. Our spring season's finishing up here in the next, I think we got another 2 weeks here. Extra week because we had a rain out. So this has been a great season. Had about 200 kids out again this year, which is pretty consistent and ramping up for our trip to Guatemala that we take every year down to Antigua and the surrounding areas for a tournament that we created down there and pouring into those communities and as well as our summer camps. We've got one in Waco and one up in Wheaton, Illinois this summer too. So wrapping some things up and starting some things as well, but excited about what Warrior Way's doing. And we'll get to talk a little bit today with our
Yeah.
guest that's on about the trip that we got to take in the spring to Costa Rica too. So excited about the way things are going with Warrior Way. But I am excited about our guest today, longtime friend of mine. Probably should jump into talking to him
Yeah.
because I think he's
Hey,
probably
let's
fallen
tell
asleep over here on the other side.
I just saw him dying laughing while we were talking, but,
Yeah.
why don't you tell us who we got? I know you've been waiting to get this guy on. It's a longtime friend of yours. So who do we have, and, why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, man, excited that we got Todd Yelton, the legend, the real legend
Yes,
here
yes.
today on the podcast. He's been head coach at Samford for a couple of years now, and we'll get into his story a little bit more. But Todd and I have been friends for a long time because of soccer and how that world's brought us together. And longtime coach, very successful coach, not just on the field but off. And excited to dive into what he's been doing over the last couple of years of his life and how the game has taught him a lot about leadership in life. And excited to have him. So, Todd, man, we're pumped you're here, buddy. How you doing?
Oh, better than I deserve, I guess, So I I laugh because um, I was like, gosh, we are getting old. I've known you for a minute, right? And I don't know, Paul, it's been really great to get to know you and spend time with you in Costa Rica and all that kind of stuff. And, we've played a few times and still yet remain friends. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking time out of out of your day to jump on with us. I mean, we try to get together all the time, and I had to convince you to take a week-long trip with me to Costa Rica to actually hang out with you. So, that was fun. I know we'll get into that a little bit later, but so one thing we do on the podcast is like I'm sure there's people that are listening that know who you are and know about you, but there's going to be some that don't, and we just love for you to just kind of briefly just kind of share your soccer story, just kind of where it all started, the things you learned, where you've been, where the game has taken you, where you are now at Samford University, and just take us through kind of your soccer and your career path with soccer.
Well, I mean, the fact I'm a college soccer coach will probably says one or two things. Either God has a plan for your life or a great sense of humor, right? So I grew up in East Tennessee and, not necessarily the soccer hotbed of the world probably, and probably would never have been around a soccer ball, touched a soccer ball if it weren't for my father being on the board of a private Christian school with me having an enormous graduating class of 38 people, you know. I would have football as the easy answer. And I remember I walked into my dad's bedroom when I was in sixth grade and said, "Hey, I want to go to public school so I can play football." And my dad is 6'4", and even at 80, I'm pretty sure if he still wanted to whoop my tail end, he probably could, you know? So unlike today's model of parenting, I said, "Yes, sir." And so that's how I got involved in soccer in the first place. And, I wouldn't say that I was necessarily a great soccer player. I was a decent athlete, and hard work was part of the fabric of what I grew up with. I grew up on a farm. Directly across the street from me was King's Dairy Farm. And we're not talking about like Dairy Queen. We're talking about the real deal, you know? So, 30 in the morning to milk the cows, that sort of stuff. And had an opportunity to go. And I basically went to a school, and on the visit, I kind of it was the only Division I school. Heck, it might have been the only school that actually even talked to me, and it was maybe the worst Division I program in the entire country. And I went to Tennessee Tech and played for a year. They don't have a program anymore. And then I ended up transferring to King College, where half of my team mates were international, and I found myself in the starting 11, and I was clearly number 11 and barely so. And had a great experience there. Met my first wife there, Shauna, and ended up in Atlanta, Georgia. And there was a guy that was a few years ahead of me named Brett Teach, who was the coach at Oglethorpe University. And I went and worked camp for him. And I also was a substitute teacher, eventually got a teaching position. And that led me to two different areas. I was the head women's coach at Oglethorpe University for 4 years. And then I also was teaching and coaching in high school, and I coached at Parkview High School. And we're fortunate enough when I was at Parkview, well, actually, they hired me my first year there. I think I set record for most losses in a season. So I'm thinking they thought this was probably not the best direction they had gone. And then the next 3 years, we were in the top 10 in the country and won two state championships. And it was a really difficult decision, really, to leave there because I thought that I was probably in the best high school coaching position that I could ever imagine, right? And then got an opportunity to come to UAB as an assistant. And my first year there, we went 3-14-2. And I'm thinking I've left the best high school job in the country and we're about to get fired, right? And got to work for a really good guy there, Paul Harbin, who, gave me a lot of freedom in recruiting, but also gave me the structure of how to run a Division I program. And the next year, we had a really great year. And when this job at Samford opened, I think most people thought that uh, I was kind of crazy to do it because they'd never really been successful. And I think a lot of people thought that my next step would be at a Power Five as an assistant. So everything about this job when I took it was not great, right? Facilities, scholarship, all that kind of stuff. But I had a great university to recruit to. And, 23 years later, a few years, as you like to say there, Paul, I I've had the great fortune of coaching at this university, and the way that I would describe my relationship with this university is that I've loved this university and it's loved me back, and had some really great moments here, and probably have done things that when I took the job that if you told me that we would do it, I would have had you drug tested, right? And I thought, no chance, right? And you really have to really kind of describe my coaching career in two moments, right? You have to describe my coaching career prior to Shauna getting sick, and then ultimately losing her battle with cancer, and then ultimately how God used such a terrible event in my life to really humble me and make me realize what the most important things in life are. And they're definitely not winning a soccer match, right? And so, I would say, and I say that the way I look at it is much different. And I was probably like a lot of coaches, totally found their identity in what I did in coaching, and I can tell you it's a lot more enjoyable, way more enjoyable now to coach in the moments that I get to coach in. And so, yeah, I mean, fortunately, they let me stick around, and it's crazy. I go out here recruiting now, and I'm like, yeah, Matt Mott at Oklahoma is one of my best friends as well, and we're the old guys now. I'm like, gosh, that's happens pretty quick, is what I'd say. Happens pretty quick.
Yeah, for sure. And that it's funny because I mean, one of the things I love best about the thing that we do here, this podcast, is I love everybody's story. Everybody's just so different. There's not, I think there's some of the young coaches think there's one pathway, right, to
Right.
coaching. And what's the track? Like, how do I, how many times do you get the question like, hey coach, how do I get to be a full, head coach at a good university? How do I do that? I'm like, man, like there's 1,000 ways to get there, and yours is definitely a pretty cool path too, because I know Parkview High School, and I grew up in the times when Parkview was the high school, and it was, it was competing with our local. It wasn't the school I went to, but Heritage High School in the town I
Right.
grew up in. They were battling for state championships. You had Clint Mathis on one side, and you had, was it who was on the Parkview side? Name a couple of the guys that we would know.
Jason Moore, and you had
Yep.
Wolfie, and
Yep.
I mean,
Josh Wolfie.
like Josh is the coach at I guess he's still at Austin, is
Yeah, he's still in Austin FC. So you're talking about some guys that, were some of the best players in the country, played for our national team, were competing in the same state. And Parkview just year over year was just churning players out. And so to go from there to the college game, and then, have the trajectory that you've had at Samford over the years, is a pretty cool path. And of course, not without its own bumps. And, you mentioned, Shauna and the loss of Shauna and how that kind of changed your trajectory. If it's okay with you, man, I'd love to dive into a little bit more. You touched on like how it changed your perspective. Like, can you tell us like what dive into what was your perspective on a day to day basis, like before that, and now what is your perspective on a day to day basis? You mentioned it's not about just the wins, but how from a day to day aspect of even just dealing with your players, for
Yeah.
instance, like what is it? What is that like? What is the difference?
Well, I think I always, you know, definitely loved and cared about my players, right? That was never a question, right? I also cared a lot about winning. And so for me, I totally identified as being the Sanford soccer coach, right? And that's one of my messages to my players now is, soccer's what we do, it's not who we are, right? And because I put such worth in winning, that when we won, I was really, really happy. And then when we lost, obviously it'd take me like a week to get over a win, right? And it's really quite funny because Carl Goody, my assistant, he tells me I'm uber competitive. I'm like, gosh, what if you'd known me 10 years ago? I'm just like, yeah, you know. But what happened to me is, um, I think we've had this conversation before, and like, those people who struggle with confidence, right? Yeah, that's not me. Which is a nice way of saying that I can be arrogant, right? And, I'm sneaky good at hiding it, if I'm honest, right? And, what happened when Shauna got sick is that God just shattered me. He broke me into like 1,000 pieces. And it's also why I think one of the greatest qualities that any human can have is humility, right? So I don't have to get up in the morning and say, "Hey, God, will you give me another shot of confidence," right? I need a little pick me up, right? I'm more like, God, keep me humble. And it actually became the whole basis of what we do here in our program. Like humility is the cornerstone of what we do. Um, and, you know, if you can tell me a humble person, a truly humble person, I'm not talking about fake humility. I'm talking, the real deal. We admire them. We respect them. They're people in at least an element of our life that we'd love to emulate. I think Dungy says something along these lines, and I'll probably butcher it, but you know, humility gets the respect that pride so craves, right? And so for me, what I realize is the most important things that we have are relationships, right? And so I really truly care less about winning than I ever have in my entire life, right? And part of it is like, an hour after the game, if we lose or it goes against us, then I'm generally pretty fine, like totally fine, right? Because I heard a story one time, and I won't get into the whole thing, but it was basically a youth minister talking to a kid who had lost his mother, right? And shortly before that, he'd lost a state championship, and he'd particularly said, if this is the worst thing that ever happens to you is losing a state championship, then you're blessed by God, right? So in reality, if the worst thing that ever happens to us is that we lose a soccer match or a championship or don't make the NCAA tournament or, you know, then we're really blessed by God, right? And so the perspective that I have on that, I hope, I really truly hope I already had my worst day. And, my worst day was when Shauna passed away. And, it's interesting. Um, I struggle with that, to be honest with you, sometimes, right? But Shauna told me, she's like, I don't know why God's plan is that you don't have a wife and kids don't have a mom, but I think God's plan's better. And so I hold on to that, but it also is a way that I live my life in such a way. And if I'm truly honest, a lot of times I have a bit of difficulty talking to the Almighty, right? So I do what I do out of obedience. And I think probably our kids quite enjoy playing for me a lot more now than they once did. Although I will say this, we'd have these alumni events and kids would come back, and I felt like I spent the first 2 years spending my whole time apologizing for it. And they're like, "But you're crazy. You had a great experience." But it's kind of like C.S. Lewis says, right? You don't know how bad you are until you try to be good. And so I just knew that I could do better. And I enjoy coaching now more than I ever have in my entire life. Um, and it's really because my perspective's changed on all this, right? And don't get me wrong, on a Thursday or Friday or Sunday or whatever day we happen to be playing, I 1000% want to win those. There is a chance that the referees might have noticed a difference in me, even though there's a few that I disagree when I was listening earlier to the referee stories, right?
Yeah.
We need you to come ref our games, because if you're a perfect referee, that'd be amazing, right? But I yeah, my Shauna was the first to notice that I changed. My kids were probably the second, and then my players were the third, really. And I'm like, what's different about me? And they're like, other than me not cursing at halftime anymore, what's different about me? And they're like, you're just a lot different. So I don't know. It's been very freeing, is what I would say for me.
Well, I think one of the cool things is that, through your experience and really through anybody's experience, the ability to be able to communicate that and share that with other people that hopefully don't have to go through the same thing, but can maybe learn through your experiences or other people's experiences, I think is another reason why, you know, maybe why God puts people through certain things is so they can share that so that it saves others from having to go through similar things, right? And I think that that's something that you're great about is that you've been very open and communicating, what God's taught you through these different things to not just help coaches, but help people in general, but I think in this context of coaching and leadership, I think there's some amazing lessons there. And it's not like you weren't having success before, and it's not like you're not continuing to have success, but the perspective that you have and how really feel that you're pouring into your community on and off the soccer field may be more impactful. Who knows? But I
Well, I
think
think
it's
along those same lines, it's kind of like, best I can tell, I wish it was different. I wished I hadn't gone through a tragedy, to be quite honest with you. I wish it would have been different. But, Colbert talks about this, you know, which is pretty interesting. Stephen Colbert says, "What the thing that happened to you, the worst thing that happened to you," because he lost a brother and I think a father in a plane crash. To be thankful for the thing that happened to you, right? And once again, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. But what I do know in this is that I think the Almighty used it to bring people closer to Him. And the second part that I do know is this is the best version of me, right? And I think it would be incredibly sad if it had been for changed me for the good, right? Because I think that's a thing that can happen in those moments, right? And I mean, at the end of the day, God's God. He gets to do whatever he wants, right? And I don't think he was like, wow, I can't believe I didn't see that coming. Todd's pissed off or Todd's disappointed. He knew all that was going to happen before it happened, right?
Yeah.
I was sitting in church the other day, and you can't blame God for the bad things and not give him credit for the blessings, and I think sometimes we fall right. And um, you know this. I mean, I recently got remarried, right? And so I think that's a blessing from God, right? And I don't know how that all is orchestrated. I think it's a bit like a tapestry, right? If you look on one side of the tapestry, it doesn't make any sense, right? Then you flip it over and it seems beautiful. So at some point in time, I'm pretty much expecting God to show me the beauty in it. And I don't know that I'll see that on this side of heaven, but that's my expectations. So, and I think that's probably what will happen.
Wow, that's so good. That's so good. I'm just so encouraged by that. Um, so much of that, so much of that, and I appreciate your vulnerability and just sharing that with us. I love when you just talk about just that perspective, right? That perspective shift into if you didn't care about winning, you shouldn't be coaching, right? But at the same time, to know that at the end of the day, what's the most important thing? It's not that win or loss. It's the development of the humans. It's what this is teaching us about life. It's really why we do this show is to remind us of this perspective, right? To be able to help us help each other, to remind us of what really matters and how we can get the best out of our players on and off the field, right? And so I just wanted to hear from you, and it's very likely related to that, what we just talked about, but we'd also love to hear just what makes you tick. What is your personal why, your life purpose, and how are you living that out right now?
Well, probably unlike you guys had this all figured out probably way sooner than I did, is what I'd guess. I don't think anybody else had six different majors like I did. Uh, so
Tommy boy, maybe. Tommy boy?
yeah. So I always knew I wanted to teach and coach, but I also wanted to be rich, and those didn't really line up. And so eventually that kind of changed, but then you'd have to even go back further to look at my mom and dad, right? June the 4th, 1970 is probably one of the most important dates of my life. My father, who is a minister, worked for Eastman Kodak, was most likely an alcoholic, was not a really great person. My mom and dad were about to get divorced. And that's the day he became a believer. And to give you some perspective, when he went back, he's from Western North Carolina. When he went back to preach, they could not get everybody in the church because nobody believed it. But if that doesn't happen, then if God doesn't change his life, then I'm a product of a broken home and et cetera, right? And my mom and dad just set this amazing example because my mom was a high school administrator at a small Christian school of what it looked like to love and care about others and invest in other people. Like I'll go home now and there'll be people that tell me they still have their home because of my dad. And I think in some way, shape, or form, that became something that I saw every day. So being around people and helping people became something that really became important to me, right? Sometimes I'm not great at it because I tend to be a fixer, and rather than being a fixer, sometimes I just need to listen, right? And so hopefully as I've gotten older, what's gotten better about all this that I listen first and then try to fix it. Both Shauna and Beth have both told me, "I just need you to listen. Don't try to fix," right? I don't know if you've ever had that experience, guys, but for me,
Never, never.
yeah, never.
Mm-mm,
No, no,
mm-mm, no.
no, you guys are leading these marriage conferences. I know. Um,
Our wives don't listen to this, so we can say stuff like that.
Well, I have to
so
be careful because mine gets on here sometimes, so I had to be careful what I
That is
say. So
true.
I'll be called out, no problem.
that's true. In the country, we like to say there are men who are liars and there are men who are henpecked. So you can pick which. But I think the thing that makes me really tick in all this is just the ability to help people and whatever it might be and whatever facet of life it may be. And, I mean, um, and it is not would be, it has been like, I have walked off the field in certain situations and massive wins, whether it's as a player. I was fortunate enough to win a high school championship in two years as a player. And, you walk off the field and you're like, what's next? What's the next step? Right. And so it was just about the wins and losses. And I guess it talks about James being tossed to and fro, and that's kind of the way it feels. Right. But really, if your purpose is to help kids become better people, right? And, and ultimately that's why I think the gospel is such a great example and for every part of our life, right? Not only in coaching, right? Because I don't think we can ever go wrong with the gospel in coaching, in marriage and friendship and all of it, right? Because the primary theme through that is that God loves us no matter what. And it's one of the things that's how I changed so much is I used to make everything kind of tend to be personal, like you're letting me down, that sort of stuff, right? And that's not the reality of it, right? It's like, if we love these kids as people and love them as Christ set the example, then they're all going to feel valued, right? And I think that's the most important thing that we miss out on this is that kids need to feel valued, right? And it's the hardest part of coaching. 1 through 11, Paul knows this, 1 through 11, they think you're pretty cool, right? Especially if you're winning, okay? 11 through 16, they're not thinking of ways to kill you in your sleep, but they'd love to start, right? You get past 16 or 17 kids, they may have thought of a way to kill you in your sleep, right? And you know what that means? That just means they're normal. They're normal. And it baffles me that coaches like, I can't believe that Susie's upset. And I'm like, "What? Think back when you were from 18 to 22, right? No way." And I'm like, that kind of comes with the territory. It doesn't mean that my kids don't care about me and they don't love me and all those type of things, right? It just means they're normal kids. And so for me, helping them become these great people that I think I really do believe that our alumni are, and creating this family, right? And it's like I've talked to a recruit and I'm like, some of the things I bet you've heard are two things that we have great culture, right? And that we're a family, right? And I'm like, well, if they say we just hold hands and sing Kumbaya, is that really the way your family works? Because it's not really the way it works, right? And a perfect example of that is as a parent, if I have my son or daughter when they were in school were wanting to do something that I thought was going to be not great for them, then if I let them do whatever they want to do, that doesn't demonstrate that I love or care for them, right? And so I love a good quote. And Tom Landry says, "The role of a coach is to make players do what they don't really want to do to achieve the goals they really want to achieve." So it's just accountability, right? And if we're honest, being an 18 to 22-year-old right now is one of the most difficult things with social media and all that kind of stuff. And just help them navigate that. And I just think soccer is such a great, and not even soccer, anything athletics, just say in general, right? I think it's such a great example, and the life lessons that we learn there can impact our life forever. And I think ultimately what motivates me the most is just helping people become better people. And, I mean, it's not the easiest of tasks at Samford, right? We get such great kids already, but, Paul had a chance to spend time with them. And one of the things I took back from that trip that is because he's been around some really, really good kids. It's just the compliments he gave about our players, right? And hopefully, hopefully we're living out what we talk about, right? That it's actually true. And I guess if I'm using one thing as the thing, it would be the gospel to try to live out the gospel. And I fail at it as much as I get it right, probably, but that's ultimately what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Man, I think, you know, there's so much to dive into there. And I think like just that impact of, or focus on helping people. I think sometimes coaches tend to forget and get caught up in the wins and losses. And at the end of the day, that is ultimately what we're, you know, on campus to do, is to help those kids who are graduating high school who think they're adults because they're no longer under the thumb of their parents right away. And us as coaches realizing we have this hopefully 4-year window to help them go from where they think they're adults to when they actually can go out and be functional adults in the real world. And I think the coaches that can really grasp that, like I know you do, and really, allow them some freedoms, but at the same time give them that accountability that they need. That's not their parents. You know, kids who can find the coaches that do that at a university are the lucky ones, I think. And then the ones who find the coaches who actually understand how to teach the game and how to be successful as a team are even more lucky. And I think that's what you bring to Samford, and that's what you bring to a culture. And, again, you mentioned Costa Rica. I got to see it firsthand. It was awesome. We had a number of your kids, come with us to Costa Rica. I twisted your arm and convinced you we were going to go to Costa Rica and
Costa
have a
Rica was
mission
the
trip.
catchphrase there, by the way.
Do what?
I said Costa Rica was the catchphrase there, right? You did, I've been to Ukraine on a missions trip. Let me just tell you, there's beaches tend to help a little bit in that whole regard.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we're gonna go to the beach. Probably we're gonna do some work too. But I did see firsthand. I mean, your kids, and you're right. I have been blessed. I've had some amazing, amazing groups of young people come through the doors when I was at Baylor University and even at Northern Illinois. And your kids are right on par with some of the greats that I was able to coach and be around. Just you know, day one, you guys got up at like 5 a.m. You traveled all stinking day. I meet your team in the airport. We get to Costa Rica. We get off the bus, and like the first thing your kids are saying is, "Thank you so much. Like, yeah, this is just amazing. Like, you've been traveling all day. What's been great? We all stink. We smell bad. We've been traveling, and we just got here. Like, so it was right away. I knew it was going to be a great group, and we did have a lot of fun and service. And you know, just through that trip, Todd, like what were some things you thought, like from a leadership standpoint, do you think that you and maybe your team kind of pulled out of some of those experiences while we were in Costa Rica for, you know, 7, 8 days doing some service things. We can dive into different things that we did, but just as a 30,000 foot view, what would you say, you guys, now that you've had time to come back and process, what are some things you guys have pulled out of that experience?
Well, I'm gonna need a new roommate is one of the things I took out of that experience next time we get.
Yeah, I think you put that on the survey afterwards. It was like, this
Yeah.
is great, except my roommate had some issues. So we can
Well,
take care of that.
that'd be very untrue. I mean, the time to share and fellowship with you was really amazing, and I really am thankful for that. But, one of the things you find on mission trips, right, is that they can be a truly humbling experience, right? Especially with everything that we've been given here in the States and that sort of stuff, right? And I think the way that mission trip went, and one of the things I really appreciated is it wasn't necessarily this structured, schedule, right? We just kind of the way that God led it and that sort of stuff, right? And in doing that, players have to kind of, in moments, um, take leadership roles, right, and do things. It was just really cool to see how God worked through that, to be honest with you. And then the local, ministers there were just so uplifting to us, and, how they live their lives and through FCA and whatnot. And, I don't know, I think one of the things, the 2 things that we talk a lot about in this program are love and humility, right? And it was just such a avenue to be a part of that and demonstrate that. And it's funny that we use the word humility, but also we use the word pride, because I was a bit, maybe pride's not the right word, and but thankful, maybe thankful to see how our kids demonstrated that in 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 that moment. We took, 10 or 11 kids, and the plan was, that, when we originally talked about this, we go every couple years, and we made a very strategic decision to let Kelsey be your go-between when she was here on our staff. And, she did such a great job, and you did such a great job setting that up. And, it's amazing that we had a few kids that spoke a bit of Spanish, but for the most part, no, and just how God opened those doors and hopefully paved the way. I guess we were the first one to do that with you and pave the way for future things. But I don't know if the 2-year plan is gonna work. I think our kids we're so excited about it and would really love to do it every year. And I don't know, I'm just really thankful, and probably my favorite part of those moments, and I'm not sure every team gets this, right? Because just the competitive nature of teams and how they do it. I am so thankful for, the devotional moments we had, and to hear kids share their heart and be vulnerable in those moments. Because I mean, ultimately, that's kind of breaking down barriers in the way I look at it. And if you'd have asked me to pick a group to go, that would not have been the group that I picked to go, right? Like, I would have not seen all that, and I think you would attest that it was an amazing, amazing week, and just how that group kind of intertwined and worked together. And then how I've seen them come back from the trip, and that's been prevalent in their lives. Because in my mind, the hardest thing about missions trip is when you come back is, when you're on a missions trip, everybody says the right thing. Nobody says a bad thing. Everybody has, for the most part, really good attitudes because we're out there, we're suffering for Jesus, right? And as I told you, if you don't put it on Facebook, it really didn't happen, right? Nobody sees uh, the suffering that we did, and those really out there, and but to see kids come back and not basically crash would be the word I use, right? Because I think that happens on mission trips a lot. It's just been, it would tell you that it was a life-changing event in my life. And, it's funny. I think, Paul, this as far as being involved in Ukraine and everything with our family, and Shauna being involved in Ukraine. She kept wanting me to go, and I'm like, I didn't mind if it was a mission trip with a nice Hilton and a beach, because that's about as much suffering as I wanted to do. And but it truly changed my life as well, going on that mission trip, and I tell people I was going to Ukraine on a mission trip, like, "Wow, you're going to Ukraine?" I'm like, "Wow, do you know something about Ukraine?" I don't know, and, but it's just amazing how God uses those moments to shape us into who he wants us to be.
Yeah. I think about those humble moments within your own team. The whole design was to go and obviously use soccer as a ministry opportunity. And the idea was, we're going to do some camps and some clinics, maybe some pickup games here and there and some different things. And, one of the days, we were planning to do a youth clinic, and the school we were going to serve was like, "Hey, we actually could, the kids not gonna work out the kids' schedule, but we actually could use somebody to come paint our kitchen." Well, I've been doing mission trips with this group in Guatemala. We've never painted anything, so, but, when I was like, "Hey, okay, that's what the need is, and that's what we're gonna do." And, I didn't have to sell anything to the team. It was like, "Yeah, okay, let's go paint," and to take that even further, we're painting this kitchen, right? And you and I had to go do a coaches clinic. And the idea was like, do you girls want to stay and finish this or come back tomorrow and do it? And I just loved it. The girls were like, no, we're going to finish this. We started this. We're going to finish this so that if for some reason we don't make it back tomorrow, we're not leaving them hanging. And I just love that. Said so much about your team and your culture that it was just like, hey, and they're covered in paint. They weren't great painters, man, but they were covered in paint. They had a great teacher because you're a great painter, but what?
Yeah, that's not true. That's not true.
What?
Well, I might be better than them because I've done it a few more times, but I don't know that I was like, Bob Villa out there. I don't know if anybody even knows that's kind
I
of
remember
thing.
Bob Vila, Home
Oh, yeah.
Improvement, but as a coach, like, when you're seeing that, like, what's going through your head, man, when you're seeing your team even just step up? Because that wasn't directed by you at all. That was all them.
Once again, I love this saying. It's hard to complain when you're grateful, right?
Yeah.
And you know as well as I do, us as coaches and even leaders, we can complain, right? And I just think they were really grateful for the opportunity to be there and to serve. And I guess the other thing for me is one of the things that we do here that I think is so important is servant leadership. You know, I just think, they did a study on leaders, right? And they looked at all these leaders and like, um, no offense to Michael Jordan, but like if you look at the Chicago Bulls, right? They don't win championships until Bill Cartwright gets there, right? And Bill Cartwright as a captain was one who would, "Hey, let me get your luggage, let me do this, let me do that for you," right? And a few years ago, we changed the whole way that we do here. Instead of, um, my experience as a player and most experience as a player was when you get there, your freshman year is the year that you do everything, right? You carry everything and you hear a lot of, hey, freshman, right? And we had a turnover in our team as far as kids graduate. And somebody asked me one time, who are gonna be the captains, and I told them whoever's willing to carry the goals. And so when kids arrive at Samford now, it's the seniors and the captains who are moving goals and grabbing bibs and all that kind of stuff, right? And, I actually think it's a big part of why we've had the success that we've had in recent years, and just to see them live that out there, um made me think, maybe there are a few things that we're doing right, and, because that's what that was. Everything about that was servant leadership. Those kids, they were just like, didn't care to get their hands dirty, didn't care if they had when we painted those fences and that green paint, you'll appreciate this. We played a spring game the other day, and I put on a pair of shorts that I didn't really look too closely at, and there was green dots all over the shorts. And we played UAB in that spring game, and their colors are their colors are
Green.
green. Like, I don't really know how this all gonna work out, but, and I think that would be the word I would use is when I saw that is gratitude would be the thing that I would say is just, wow, it's like, man, this is really cool. It's like really, really cool. And so thankful and love our kids' heart, and there's another quote I love. It's like, you don't know who you are till you've been tested, right? And so, it's easy for me to say all these things about my approach to it and how I believe these things but we've also been the moments where we've been really, really successful, right? And so I hope that I don't have to be tested in such a way that we're having a rough year, but that would actually reveal whether or not this is all just talk or it's actually true, right? And so in that moment on the missions trip, it was one of those like, I don't know if it's an aha moment or what how you classify it, but it's like, okay, maybe the culture that we've been able to create here is actually going to be the things these kids live their life out and that's ultimately what it's about, right? Like, I love it when I hear a kid say, "I don't remember the wins and losses, but I remember the people," because I think that's super important. That's the most important part, right? It's like, we've been fortunate enough to win a lot of championships, but I don't really know what that number is, if I'm honest, but I remember the people, and I think that's you never go wrong with that.
Yeah, there's so much there. That last little bit, folks, go back, rewind it, listen to some of that stuff because there's a lot of nuggets as we talk about on this show, just, that you can take, and if you're not already doing those things, I encourage you to do so. I think one of the things you talked about was gratitude. I know even last night in my home, there was a lot of bickering going on, between, 2 of my children in particular, and I just said, "Hey, let's stop, um, and we're just gonna share 1 or 2 things about everyone in this room that you're grateful for."
Yeah.
And, we fin and one of those 2 was like, "No, I'm not doing it." I said, "You know what? You're letting the enemy get a foothold. Don't let it be a stronghold. Let's do this." And sure enough, we went through it all, and not that it was perfect, but I'm like, "Guys, it's really hard to be mad at someone when you're grateful for them.
It's true.
And it's really hard to be mad at someone and hate someone if you're praying for them. So let's 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 take a step back here." The other thing you talk about is Ukraine. I too, my wife and I actually we met playing soccer on a mission trip over. Part of that trip was to Ukraine, and
Oh,
special
awesome.
special place in my heart for there as well. And just now, obviously, with so much going on there and seeing a lot of refugees coming even to my hometown here in Folsom and just such amazing people. It was such a great, not beaches, not necessarily the natural beauty of Costa Rica,
Mhm.
but things that you will learn there, people you will meet there that will forever change you. Anyway, going back to gratitude, just seeing people grateful for things that we would go, man, wow, that I didn't even think about being grateful for those things. Yeah, it's just it's a whole different thing when you go places and you meet people. Cross-cultural experiences are so important for people, and I love that your players are getting that experience and being able to do that together as well. I know my son is really bummed. His team's going to Brazil this summer,
Mm.
and he's not able to go with them because his cousin, who's like his brother, is getting married, and so he's so torn, to be able to, I mean, to not be able to do that. So, anyway, appreciate so much of that, and I'm grateful that we got to hear it. I'm glad I am. I think there's so many good things we can learn from there. We've talked a bit about this, and we've talked around this a little bit, but I just wanna talk with you about how you incorporate your faith into your coaching, what that looks like, and how you believe that your incorporation of faith, has contributed to your team culture, success on and off the field, and obviously, based on what you talked about earlier, I imagine it's a little bit different before and after, your wife's passing, but what might that look like? What does that look like, and how can you other coaches kinda maybe I know a lot of coaches struggle with that, like, what does it look like? Because sometimes it's like this divide, and based on what I've heard, it seems like that's not the case. I'd love to hear from you there and what that looks like.
Well, I'm sure there's still a few people, kids when they get here at some certain moments of my coaching, they're like, "I thought coach was a Christian," right? Um, but I think the biggest thing is that what does it say? David was a man after God's own heart, right? And and I think if you go into the mindset that we're going to live this perfect life, then you failed in that already, right? And so for me, it's kind of what I talked about earlier. It's ultimately the gospel, right? And I just don't think you can go wrong with it. It's like the way the way that God looks at us and treats us is just such, you know, an amazing way. And I read a book called The Ragamuffin Gospel by Brennan Manning. And I know it's a bit blasphemy to say that it might have been more impactful in my life than the Bible, but in that moment, I hear that it 1,000% was. And you'd have to look a little bit at my background. I grew up in East Tennessee. I worked, you know, like we were talking about the other day, like kids talk about going on spring break, and spring break at my house was just my dad got an extra week's work out of the boys, right? I have 2 brothers who are both great coaches in their own right. We're all 3 college soccer coaches. And so I had this image of faith that it was something that we earned rather than freely given, right? And I think probably in my coaching career, I probably transferred that into my coaching in some ways, right? Everything's hard work and that sort of stuff. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that you can limit that. I think we have a pretty good reputation as a program of working really hard, trying to cover every blade of grass and all that kind of stuff, right? But if our worth is only found in our performance, um, that leads to a lot of bad feelings. That leads to anxiety. That leads to how we identify, you know, how we view our worth in our relationship with Christ and all those type of things, right? And so the way I incorporate it into my life is that I start with the whole premise that if you play great, if you don't play great, if you screw up, all that type of thing, that doesn't much I care about you or I love you as a player, right? Now, there is a performance base of this as far as if you're going to play or not, right? And that's why I love all this new analytics that we have because it takes the personal side out of it, meaning, hey, we use Polar and it's like if a kid comes in and wants to know why they're not playing and you say, well, these 4 kids are covering more ground, et cetera, right? And but whether you play at the highest level or lowest level, we still care about you the same, right? And that's ultimately God doesn't rate us on how much money we have or prestige or any of that sort of stuff. And I would say, I think in this day and age, probably kids have definitely more heightened anxiety level because everything's out there. I mean, I'm not even sure my soccer matches made it to the press chronicle probably, right? And everything is easily available. You know, no one knew if I was playing or not playing. No one had any idea about it, right? And here, we got kids who, play for us from California or maybe it's Florida or wherever it might be, and everyone knows if they're playing or not, right? So
Mhm.
one of the things that I hope that we use the gospel in is that kids will realize that your worth is not in this. I think I can speak to it because that's exactly where I lived a good portion of my life. And then the other thing I think that the Bible is such a good thing and that the gospel is such a good thing about is that forgiveness, right? So I had an incident with a player, and unintentionally, unintentionally, the best way to put it is that I lied to her, right? Because it had to do with her a game and her playing and everything, right? And, man, it was the most humbling experience in the world for me because I think that relationships are built on trust. And that's one of the things that I think God, that you can trust God. And even though I struggle with that sometimes with losing Shauna, I think he's always going to show up. Maybe he doesn't show up like I want him to, or he doesn't give me the answer I want to, but ultimately he's always going to show up. And so it really bothered me that I had done this, right? And this kid who I could have been upset or whatever, she was really amazing. And I think she extended grace to me, right? And I think what I've learned through the gospel is with players is that they just need a bit of grace sometimes. And um, I I I'm not always capable. I mean, I without the Almighty's help in those situations, right? But if God extends grace to us, why in the world would we not do that, right? I'm even trying to get better at that at with officials, to be quite honest with you, right? I tell every official in the spring game, I said, "Hey, you don't have to worry about me yelling at you one time." They look at me a little bit bizarre, and I'm like, "Well, it's a spring game. It doesn't really, in the whole scheme of things, matter. It's just," and they're like, I don't think they believe me. And we played Vanderbilt last game of the spring, and I asked the referee after the game. I said, "How'd I do?" And she's like, "Surprisingly well." So I don't know that, uh, but yeah, incorporating faith, like, it's who I am, right? Like, it's really who I am. It's the way I live my life. I'm a broken vessel that screws it up all the time. But, if it wasn't a part of who I am, then I don't know how it would work. And nor do I think that I'd be as successful in doing it a different way, right? And I'll tell players, and I think it's super important. It's like I could scream and yell at you. I could scream and yell at you, and your performance might, not definitely, but might be better, right? But I'd really like for you to, in 10 years, to want to actually talk to me. I'd like to actually, it'd be amazing if you were like, "Hey, coach, I just had my first kid," or "Hey, I'm getting married," or, those type of things, right? And I think if you do it in a different way, you might find success in those 4 years. But I'm not really sure you're finding success for a lifetime. And I think I'm way more inclined now to look at things in success for a lifetime. And, you know, unfortunately, although a true statement, and, in my early coaching career, before Shauna passed away, there are kids that played for me that I am 1,000% sure would never reach out to me if they were in needed help or any of that. And, I that's not their fault, that's mine. And, that responsibility lies on my shoulder and even trying to repair those relationships, many of them have, but there's some that will never be repaired. And, once again, that responsibility falls on me, and I don't want that to be I don't want that to be the way that, that my, you know, last part of my coaching career goes, you know? And it's like, you always have to do the right thing, right? And in this day and age of the transfer portal, where kids are getting basically cut in their programs, right? And moved on. I don't think you can talk about family and that and move kids on in that way, right? We just don't really talk about that as far as transferring. Kids are smart enough to know if they're playing or not, and if they want to move on, you know. And so I, I, I learned that from my parents, and I hope that we continue to do that, right? It doesn't mean if kids don't meet the expectations of the basic things, you know, whether it might be the things they control, right? Like fitness, their grades, their attitude, those type things, right? As long as they control those, they're welcome in this program if they've been invited in. I and that is not me, because there is a competitive nature in me that, you know, like you're like, oh, there's a kid in the portal that we'd like to have, we don't have the money for, you know, so we're gonna move a kid on. But that's just not. I don't think that's living out how I see that family should look and the gospel should look.
Well, I think there's a really key point in all of that is that, I think the coaches that are trying to figure out how do I really merge my faith and my coaching into my team, there's just one core thing that goes through the entirety of everything you just said. It just gets down to who you are, right, and what you're about. So again, you can't give something you don't have. You can't be something that's not within you. And I think that's something that, you know, through your career and through your experiences and the things that God's put in your life through your family and everything, you know, your parents, becomes who you are. And I think the coaches that they really do want that value in their program. What, as a coach, what are you seeking out and what are you putting inside of yourself and what do you want to become so that you can then portray that and be that for your players? And I think that that's something we even teach True Warrior Way with our players, right? Like, hey, this is really what it means to merge your faith in your sport. It's really not separate. It is together, and it is, who you are and what you're about.
My dad uses a story from the pulpit, you know, and he says, he'll say he has an orange in his hand, right? And he'll be like, if I squeeze this orange, what's going to come out? And, you know, people say pulp and all that kind of stuff. And my dad always says, what's ever inside, right?
Hey,
So the moments of life when we're squeezed, whatever's inside of us is what's going to come out, right? Like I like to tell people, I'm a work in progress, right? I definitely don't have all this stuff figured out, but I hope it's better.
sure.
I really do. You know, I really and I'm not, to be fair, I don't want to come across that I'm critical of the way people run their program, because it's not like I haven't done all those things in my coaching career as far as in having kids transfer and that sort of stuff. But you know, maybe it's just where I'm at now, and and the way I look at it. But I do feel like that is such a way of demonstrating your worth not in soccer. That's what I believe.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Todd, man, it's been awesome just catching up. I wish, like most of our interviews, we could have 5 or 6 of these and never touch on everything that we could talk about. And love being able to just catch up and just share kind of what soccer and faith and everything's been for you. And we finish every one of these interviews with 2 questions. So we're going to hit those at you here. And then we'll unfortunately have to wrap things up because I'm sure you have other things you need to do today than talk to
Oh,
us crazies on a podcast
this
for a
is
couple more hours.
this is the highlight of my day.
All right, that says something too. But anyway, we won't get into that. But
Hey,
the
I
first,
was I
yeah,
was giving you a compliment. You gotta take that. You gotta take that.
appreciate it, man. I do appreciate that. I do, and so does Phil. We both do. But
Yes.
first question, buddy. How have you used the lessons you've learned directly from the game of soccer in marriage and parenting?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story about that. When Beth and I started dating, right? And it took me a minute, to be honest with you. I'm fairly certain. I'll put it this way. I am incredibly fortunate that I dated a patient woman, because I'm not sure that most women would have stuck around and waited for me, to be honest with you. But she used to tell people that she was dating Ted Lasso, right? And I told my brother Matt, I told my brother Matt the story. And Matt's like, "Yeah, no way you're that positive." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's probably true." How have I used it in parenting and in marriage? I would say in marriage, one of the things that it has taught me is, you know, I know you got about 1,000 quotes out of me, but there's if you think your deeds are good, then they're not good. If you think your deeds are not good, then they're probably good, right? And one of the things is that it's taught me in marriage is this, right? Is if I'm doing something for my wife because I want them to think I'm a rock star, then it's not really about them. It's 100% about me. Um, and that's a Tim Keller quote. And that's also true with your team, right? If I'm doing things in coaching that are really not for my players, but they're really for my self gratification, then I'm not really doing it for them. I'm doing it for me. And so the crazy thing about it in both the situations that I've experienced, if we do it for the right reasons and the right purpose, then not only do our wives think that we're really great because it's from a point of humility and love, our players, our teams think the same thing. And that's probably been the most impactful because I was the guy who would pick my kids up at school. Not because I love Shauna and I wanted to help Shauna out. I did it so Shauna would say I was just this great guy, right? And when I started doing it for all the right reasons and did it just because I love my wife, and the same thing with my players, right? I just did it because I cared about my players. It wasn't about me. Um, man, the joy that was a part of that, and also they actually thought that I was kind of a big deal from that standpoint, right? It's like we do it in reverse, right? And I think just that's what it's done for me in both coaching and in marriage. It's made me realize that if we have the right motives, if we do it because we love people, not because we want them to think we're rock stars, for a better to put it, uh, it works kind of in the reverse, right? It kind of goes back to, you know, humility gets the respect that pride so craves. And that's what I've learned the most in that regard. And then in parenting, what I've learned about parenting is parenting's not for cows. It's the hardest thing, right? And I have 2 children. I have Mackenzie who looks like me but acts like Shauna, and I have my son who looks like Shauna and acts like me, which means he's a good-looking kid, but he's a work in progress like his old, right? But it's been, I think they would say that my heart is very different, right? And, um, you know, I can't parent the way that my dad did. I mean, it's not that time period, right? And I just think, loving them no matter what, not that my mom and dad didn't, but, it's just a different time. And I think them knowing that no matter what they do or decisions they make or any of that sort of stuff, that it's an unconditional love. I think that's the biggest takeaway from all this, right? And there's things I do a lot different, in regards to that. But fortunately, my kids understand that. And they also 100% know that they're loved by me. And I'm just thankful for the relationship that I have with them because it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. No, that's so good. I mean, obviously the theme just being, as you said, it's that humility. It really is. It comes down to, and I wish I could say I have never done something because I want someone to notice how selfless I am by doing what I was doing, right? Um, wow, that's amazing. You did the dishes again just because you wanted to do the dishes. Yeah. There's a great Friends episode on that
Uh-huh.
where Phoebe said, remember that? Where Phoebe says to
Yes.
Chandler, do something, one thing, just to not get the credit. And he comes back. He's like, I finally did it. I walked a lady across the street, an old lady. And she's like, but you felt good about it, huh? He's like, Ah, got it. I totally remember
All
that one.
true, right? I mean, it's all
Oh,
true.
totally, totally, but at the same time, it really is, it's something that when you take a step back and go, "Okay, I just need to" if I'm doing it for that, then yeah, it's 100% for the wrong reasons, and it will come back to you're not gonna have that you won't have that gratitude, you won't have the contentment, you won't have the ability to truly, do things because of the other, and because of that, yeah, that kinda that sweep the sheds, you talked about that with your team, right? With that idea of the servant heart,
Mhm.
and we so often wanna tack on leadership, servant leadership. We always wanna be the leader, but, the scripture talks about servant, you
Yeah.
to be a servant. It doesn't say servant leader, it says servant. Now, that's a whole different conversation for another day, but that's something to it's what I'm hearing here too. Alright, as Paul said, all good things must come to an end, and we are at our last question here. What have you watched, read, or listened to that has most impacted your thinking on how soccer explains life and leadership?
It's interesting. There's a couple of things, like, right, purely from a soccer standpoint, like, I grew up in East Tennessee, and the only thing you could see one time a year was the FA Cup, right? And in the '80s, Liverpool was there all the time, right? And not so much recently, but yeah. And so I'm actually a massive Jurgen Klopp fan. And then I found out that he's actually a person of faith. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because his relationship with his players and which is probably not as spoken of in the Premiership. And so I the way that he kinda in his chats or whatever, a lot of times he'll talk about the example of Christ, right? And, you got a guy at the highest level that's using as well. And then, I'm not so much a book reader in terms of, like, coaching books and all that, although I love all Dungy's books. I think Tony Dungy's books are amazing, right? But there's actually a few books that I always recommend to our players, and one is Unbroken, and that's the story of, World War II and concentration camp and all that, because it's ultimately the the greatest example of how a human can live out Christ's forgiveness and love. And then there's another book that I quite love called Same Kind of Different as Me. It's a book about how that we can make an impact on people's lives if we're truly changed, right? And there are parts of that book that can hit pretty close to home for me, and it's about a homeless guy and a couple and their relationship and how that they have impacted this particular person's life, right? And I mean, I'm reading that book and I'm on a plane and I am basically crying my eyes out. I'd
Mm.
put it down. But those are books that I think are have been very helpful for me and because they speak to service and humility, and I just think that the leaders that follow those principles are just massively successful, right? And I think the absence of humility, like you don't have to be humble in your leadership. You really don't. I know coaches who are massively successful, and it's not a part of who they are. They do. But ultimately, you can motivate in 2 ways. You can motivate through fear or you can motivate through love, right? I think fear is a very short lasting thing. I think it's in the moment, and not to say you can't get even through 4 years of college and that sort of say, but the example of Christ is love, right? And so motivating through love, I think that's life changing. I think that lasts well beyond the 4 years of I'm dealing with a kid. And so I love books. I really quite love books. And you know, I grew up in Tennessee, so I grew up as a Tennessee football fan, so I don't usually quite go to the Saban tree of thinking, right? But he really talks about the process, and that's really what this is, and that's what life is. It's a process, right? And you can't jump from point A to point D. There's all these steps in between, and making sure that we don't miss out on those steps, right? You can't cut corners in life. You can't cut corners as I tell our kids, one of these days they're going to be, wives and bosses and moms, right? Don't and don't forget the process of what that looks like, right? And this is just really a training ground for that, of what it looks like to do those things. And I'm incredibly thankful and grateful for a university, I think, that lives out those principles. And on top of it, I think our alumni are going out into the world and making a difference, not only as athletes, but just as general people. And so to get to work in an environment where that's part of the fabric of the university is truly amazing.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. I often talk about collaboration, teamwork requires relationship, relationships require trust. Trust takes time. Don't rush the process.
That's right.
Right? And I think that's so important, to remember as we do this, and there's so much in each of those statements too, but thank you so much, Todd. Thank you for being a part of the show, first of all. Thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for just pouring in to the young women, on your team and on your staff and your and beyond that. I'm so grateful for what you're doing. There's guys like you out there making a difference. So thank you.
Well, it's very kind of you. I won't let's not forget I'm a work in progress, but I
Of
do
course you are. Of
but
course
I
you
do
are.
really appreciate that, and I've quite enjoyed this. I've heard, Paul spoken of it and of his relationship with you, and I, uh, I don't always quite enjoy interviews, sometimes like this, but these chats and just going back and forth and talk about, I don't know, culture and faith, and hopefully there's something in this conversation that maybe helps, young coaches, or I don't know, old coaches, or wherever it falls. But, you know, we I think I think there were 1,000 people who helped me every day, to hopefully get a little bit better at this. And if we can all do that, then we're probably making this world a lot.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, I am grateful. And so folks out there, I hope you are too. And I hope that you take what you learn from this and you do use it. You engage it. You take it and remember, this idea of humility. And if it's not something that you know much about, um, take a look at there's a great book on it called Humility. It's just a simple book. Andrew Murray, one of my favorite books out there. So check that out. And, if you want to learn more about Warrior Way, we talked about the Costa Rica trip. They're also doing a trip to Guatemala. They do other things in Waco, Texas. If you want to learn more about that, warriorwaysoccer.com. Paul and Marcy are doing down there. If you want to learn more about coaching the bigger game, we talked a little bit about that at the beginning as well. You can check that out at coachingthebiggergame.com. And if you want to learn more about Providence World and the work we're doing there, that's just at providenceworld.com. So, folks, as always, we hope that you're taking what you're learning from this show and you're using it to be a better leader, better coach, better spouse, better parent, better in everything that you do. And continually remind yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great couple weeks.